everyone. We are Group D, and we'll be presenting Big Sky Brewing Company's business level strategy. My name is Megan.
I'm Pete.
I'm Jodi.
I'm Branon.
This is Anita.
And Pete is going to start us off with the company's generic competitive strategy.
So Michael Porter's generic competitive strategies fall into a four-quadrant graph, with cost leadership being in the upper left quadrant, as you can see here in this diagram, differentiation upper right, cost focus is the lower left, and differentiation focus is the lower right. We as a team have determined that the Big Sky Brewing Company falls into the differentiation focus generic competitive strategy, and in determining this, we considered the fact that Big Sky Brewing Company concentrates on a particular buyer group, which is which will be further discussed later on in the presentation. But essentially, the overall beer market is a very large and broad scope, whereas Big Sky Brewing Company focuses on a narrow scope of craft brew drinkers, and they seek differentiation in that targeted market segment, in that they have this persona of the Montana beer brand. The four business lines, or the four product lines that they have, each have something distinctly to do with Montana. So that's where the focus strategy comes into play. And then with regard to pricing, one might be inclined to say that they are, because they're on par with their competitors, that they don't fit into the mold of differentiation focus. But within the narrow scope of the craft beer market, their prices are on par with their competitors. And according to research that we found, that is consistent with differentiation focus, because within your targeted market segment, your prices need to be on par with your competitors, because if they're not, then your consumers will not see the increased value associated with your higher price. So again, we've determined that Big Sky Brewing Company fits into the differentiation focus in Michael Porter's generic competitive strategies. And next, Jodi will be covering the value creation frontier. Next slide.
Hello, so we have the value creation frontier plot in front of us. This is a graphical plot of companies in the beer industry. One end depicts high differentiation, and the other end shows low prices. Lower priced items have less differentiation, such as in the bottom right, where we have our four largest breweries in the United States: Anheuser, Miller, Coors, and Pabst. These target large segments. They're low price because they produce large quantities with economies of scale. They also have large distribution channels, which help keep their prices low. They're shown big on this market because they do target large markets, and this really is just beer. There's no distinct flavors, kind of all generic beer. Moving up to our next strategic group, we have imports. These are a little pricier. These offer a little more distinct flavor. It appeals to slightly smaller target groups. These are generally considered better tasting than the group below them. Then up in the far left, we have our craft beer our target segment, in which Big Sky falls within this group. These are regional groups. They're targeted to smaller markets. They're higher priced than both the imports and the large breweries below. And these beers have more distinct flavors, and they offer more varieties. They're perceived as having fresher, better ingredients, and sometimes you might hear things such as organic ingredients or see organic ingredients on these types of labels. These, typically are thought of as having high quality ingredients being put into this product equals high quality products coming out and being served to customers. In Big Sky's strategic group of craft beers, can see their competitors. New Belgium is in their market is the largest bubble. They produce the most barrels each year in that group of their most direct competitors, and Deschutes is right behind them. Alaskan beer is furthest to the left as they're the highest priced, and within the strategic, with this value creation frontier, this gives Big Sky the opportunity to see open segments that they could possibly move into. There are some spots farther to the left above Alaskan for higher priced, more distinctive beers. And then below, there is some room to be slightly above the imports, above the imports and slightly below the market group that they're in now. And now we'll move to growth strategy with Macon. Next slide.
So just as a quick overview of the main growth strategies, you have your integration, which can be both vertical and horizontal. And vertical integration essentially is this idea that they are increasing their production facilities, and by doing this, they're actually integrating into their production facilities. Horizontal is expanding into new markets. Cost leadership is obviously a low-cost strategy, and there's differentiation and focus, and differentiation is just having like a unique selling proposition, whereas focus is a focused, streamlined thought process and aim towards either cost leadership or differentiation. Next slide. So product differentiation, this is one of the main strategies that Big Sky is currently implementing. And like I previously mentioned, it really centers around this idea that you have a unique selling proposition or a USP. And their branding for Big Sky is currently branding this local craft brewer. And so they get the individuals who come in who are looking for local craft brewers who specifically seek out not large scale companies, but the companies that are producing at a very local level. So their customer base is based in preferences, and they all have these preferences towards the specific brewing type. And in addition, this influences people to seek out the brand and come from other locations to try Big Sky and try their beer. However, there are some side effects of this, and one of the side effects is that it limits the production and therefore limits the sales. So if you are brewing locally and that is your USP, you cannot expand into too large of a demographic or a geographic area, because that kind of removes your entire USP in general, and that puts a cap on how much you can sell as well. Next slide. So these are the two types of growth strategies that they're currently considering, Big Sky is currently considering. The first one is vertical integration. Like I previously said, this is the idea that because they can't meet their current demands, they want to expand the production facility and the production capacity. So by doing this, instead of hiring a new facility, which is an option, you can always hire someone to produce more for you. You can also vertically integrate, which is essentially becoming your supplier. So they could become a production facility. And this is an idea that they're throwing around on whether they want to expand in this direction. The next type of growth strategy is horizontal integration. And the idea behind horizontal integration is expanding your reach, expanding the markets you're in, and this can lead to an increase in production. The expanding of the reach can be both market segments, so you can be going after specific segments, or you can go after geographic locations. So you can physically expand, or you can expand within the marketplace. However, both of the integration processes kind of negate their differentiation strategy. So their USP specifically is to be a local brewer. So the big dilemma that they're coming into currently is whether they actually want to implement some of these growth strategies while they still want to maintain their current outlook and their current branding. Now, Branon is going to go over the recommendations that we have for the business level strategy of Big Sky.
Thanks, Megan. The next segment of our presentation will cover Big Sky's generic competitive strategy, what it should be, and the tactics. Big Sky examining and applying a differentiation strategy gives consumers and the market more value for their money by providing an above average product at average price, which is Big Sky's approach in exceeding consumers' expectations on product features and satisfying expectations on price. This approach for Big Sky identifies and marks out a middle ground between low cost and differentiation, which has its advantages in establishing a stronger market appeal to a fairly broader and arguably narrow market. The differentiation that we suggest works in Big Sky's market situation where consumer diversity makes product differentiation the norm. A common thing in establishing competitive advantages in emerging recreational drink markets is the attachment to local communities. This theme from our research is often described as a sense of place and is a vital part of Big Sky's craft beer market. Primarily, this describes the relationship between people and social settings and the emotional bonding that takes place. Emotional bondings are established through naming products after individuals, cultural identities, and in Big Sky's case, geographical locations and landscapes. Consumers in the Big Sky market prefer mid-range products rather than the basic product of low-cost companies or expensive products of top-tier brewery companies. Big Sky's generic competitive strategy in maintaining quality, consistency, volume, and growth must include, at this stage, a stronger strategic alliance to extend beyond normal company-to-company dealings. The reason for forming this alliance is to collaborate on new ventures, strengthen manufacturing weaknesses, improve supply chain efficiencies, gain economies of scale in production and possibly marketing, as well as acquiring or improving its current market access. Big Sky's alliance with its distributors or suppliers could establish efficiencies in supply chain efficiencies that could utilize Big Sky's networks for joint promotion of products, thereby economizing on distribution costs and access to customers. The best alliances that heighten a differentiation strategy have well-defined objectives, and its value depends on how well both parties work together. Lastly, like any industry that is highly fragmented, but largely controlled by a market sector in which few companies dominate, gaining market share through marketing and occupying shelf space can be an overwhelming task when already operating on thin margins and financing growth. But Big Sky is a situation they can either struggle in their current capacity or they could establish a strategic alliance with a well-capitalized company that has both the resources and expertise to help. Lastly, like any industry that is highly fragmented, but largely controlled by a market sector in which few companies dominate, gaining market share through marketing and occupying shelf space can be an overwhelming task when already operating on thin margins and financing growth. But Big Sky in this situation, they can either struggle in their current capacity or they could establish a strategic alliance with a well-capitalized company that has both the resources and expertise to help the company grow. For Big Sky, a strategic alliance is not only the answer, but it is clear, given Big Sky's threats, that an alliance is the most valuable path in sustaining growth and arguably survival. Our ideas from this presentation are examined through two filters. They are straightforward ideas that we believe will work, but may or may not have a big impact. Or, in closing, are opportunities that, if designed and orchestrated well,